before I let you go, Vijay, I wanted to go on to a subject which is different from the one we've been focusing upon, namely the student protests. It is, however, from my perspective, something that is relevant to the whole question of fascism. I've always believed that a key element of fascism is hypermilitarism. And the other day, I saw you talk about a book you've authored called Hyperimperialism, and you laid out some very interesting and quite astonishing conclusions about the true levels of military spending in the West. And since I have you here, I wanted to invite you to tell us what your conclusions were, because I think they're really quite an eye-opener.
Yeah, so this text was produced by Tricontinental and Global South Insights, which is a group of experts who are building one of the most interesting databases that I think will soon release for public use. It's got all the big databases in one place, and we're using it to establish new kind of information. Okay, now most of the time we have relied on SIPRI, this institute in Stockholm, for world military spending. What SIPRI does, which is fair enough, is they take the government spending, what the government says they are spending for the military at face value, and then they aggregate them all. Yeah, so the US government says, here's what we spend in the Department of Defense. But the problem is the US government buries a lot of its military spending. Give you a very simple example. It buries a lot of the nuclear weapons spending in the Department of Energy. It doesn't talk about the veterans spending, which it buries in the Veterans Affairs budget. So we went and looked at all the totality of the US budget and peeled out all the line items that had to do with the military. So a lot of scrubbing work had to be done. So for instance, 2022, rather than about 900 billion, the actual total of US military spending was 1.53 trillion. So, not exactly double, but near double. When we added up all the spending of different countries, we found something fascinating. See, in this period, it's become commonplace for all kinds of liberal media, including CBC in Canada, all the US media, BBC, and so on. It's become quite common for them to say China is a threat, Russia is a threat, Russia is a great threat to the planet. Okay. Okay, let's take that at face value. Now let's look at military spending, which is one arbiter of threat. Because after all, why would you have the military be so big if you're not using it around the world? If you add up the military spending of the United States, the NATO countries, including the US, and NATO plus countries like Japan and Korea, these countries account for 75% of global military spending. Okay, these countries. So the global north accounts for 75% of military spending. United States has 902 military bases around the world. China accounts for 10% of global military spending, Russia for near about 3. Now, let's add China and Russia up, just because in some quarters of the global north, there's this belief that there's a Chinese-Russian alliance. In fact, there's not. In fact, there is not, because when Russia entered Ukraine, China was under no obligation to come into the battle. They don't have a military treaty. They have a strategic treaty, but not a military treaty, unlike NATO, which is a military pact. So let's add them up 13%, just for fun, okay? Although it's not the correct thing to do. We're comparing 75% of global military spending, a bloc which has actually used nuclear weapons in Japan, a bloc which has actually illegally invaded dozens of countries in the last period itself. Okay, just in the last 10, 12 years, it's illegally invaded dozens of countries. This bloc is not considered to be the largest threat to the planet, but China and Russia, 10, 3, add them together, 13%. China has never really attacked a country outside itself in years. Chinese attacked Vietnam in 1978. Okay, that's a very long time. That's the last time China has attacked another country. Attacked Vietnam 1978, long time ago. How is China the greatest threat? How is Russia the greatest threat? Russia and China are defense military powers. Now, that doesn't mean that Russia was not aggressive when it attacked Ukraine in 2022. That was an aggressive move by definition. But an aggressive move when one country attacks another, there have been many aggressive. Currently, Rwanda's proxy group is inside the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That's an aggressive move. They attack. Nobody talks about Rwandan imperialism. These aggressive things happen all the time on the planet. Countries sent troops across the border. The government of Ecuador aggressively entered the Mexican embassy to go and capture Jorge Glass just weeks ago. These are aggressive things to do. Countries behave aggressively. Okay, that happens. But there's a big difference between aggression and imperialism. There is no Chinese imperialism or Russian imperialism. Our material in the hyperimperialism text shows that. There is no basis to make those arguments. There is one imperialism, and it's the global north's very dangerous behavior around the planet.